Hey, welcome to this lesson video. It's our part 2 of factoring quadratics that are trinomials, where our leading coefficient is bigger than 1. So again, this is second part of a video that we've already discussed kind of how to get started and reviewed things we need to remember. So you might want to catch that one if you haven't caught that one first. So we're just going to jump right in, picking up where we left off in the previous video. So we have our steps. We've already done one of these, just kind of ran out of time. So remember to factor this guy. We take our first number times our last number, and I find that product. 9 times 2 is 18. Second step is to find what two numbers will multiply to this product 18, but also combine to that middle number, -9. So think like an X puzzle. What will multiply to 18, add to -9. Now I multiply to a positive, but I add to a negative. So both of my numbers need to be negative. So I'm thinking a -6 and a -3. Let's double check. They add to -9, yep, and they multiply to +18. Sure do. All right. So then step 3 says, hey, replace the middle number with the two factors we just figured out in step 2. So here's what I mean. Take 9x squared, keep it as it is, but instead of having -9x, we're going to expand it. You know how usually you add like terms together if they both share a common variable? Well, I'm actually going to break this -9 up. I'm going to write it as -6x minus 3x. So I'm kind of like doing the opposite of combining like terms. Okay, I'm breaking it back up. And then plus 2. And now you know where I got these numbers from, right? The -6 and the -3 came from my step 2. Now the reason I'm kind of doing this, which kind of feels wrong because usually we would combine stuff instead of break it apart, the reason I did that is because it gave me 4 terms, which lets me factor by grouping. Okay, now we already talked about in the previous video that we want to have addition in between our two groups. So I'm going to treat this minus as if it were -3, so that way I can put a plus sign in the middle. And then the next step to grouping, step 5 says, hey, factor out the common factor for both groups. So the first group, let's see, they both share a factor of, oops, I wanted blue. There we go. 9 and 6. Well, they're both divisible by a 3. And let's see. They both have a variable x. So, what will multiply, what can I multiply 3 by that would get me back to 9? If I think about, distributing, 3 times what gets me 9? A 3. And I had an x squared, but we're taking an x away. So this x squared is going to bump down to just an x. Minus 3 times what will get me back to the 6? 2. And he had an x, and I'm taking an x away, so he's bumped down to just being a number with no variable attached. All right. Now let's see what happens on the second group. Now I know that over here on the second group, I'm supposed to end up with the same thing, this 3x minus 2 over here, so grouping will work. So let's see what the GCF is in the second group. Let's see, a -3 and a +2. Whoa, they don't share anything, just besides a 1, a factor of 1. And the first guy has an x and the second term doesn't. Oh man, they don't have anything in common. So if I think about just rewriting that group though, it'll be different than this group in the red, but they're supposed to be the same. So, oh my goodness, let's see. I need a +3x and I have a negative. And I need a -2, but I have a +2. Oh, okay, so they're really close. They're just different signs, right? So what I can do is I can factor out a -1 as the GCF and take a look what happens. -1 times what would get me -3x? Well, -1 times a positive. And -1 times what would get me back to +2? Well, a negative times a negative, so -1 times -2. And then my two groups are the same, right? Oh my goodness. Perfect. All right, so then the final step for this factoring by grouping, sixth step is to regroup. And so, you know, the things that are the same, the 3x minus 2, if you want to think about it like factoring out from each term. And then what the first term is left with is 3x. The second term is left with minus 1. So hopefully that color coding kind of helps too. So that would actually be my final answer for factoring this quadratic. Let's try one more. Okay, I took away the steps, so kind of like taking away the training wheels. We're flying solo now, so we just kind of have to go by memory. Let's see, I know the first step was to do the first number times the last, and so negative 3 times 14 is negative 42. And I remember that the second step said find two numbers that will multiply to negative 42 from step 1 and add to the middle number negative 19. So you're going to run through your factors of 42, see which one can give you a negative 19. You know, one number is going to be positive, one's going to be negative, since they multiply to a negative number. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking negative 21 and a positive 2. Let's make sure. They add to negative 19, yep. And they multiply to negative 42, yep. All right. So I think we've got our numbers. And so remember what happens is we kind of rewrite this original green quadratic, except we expand this middle term. So instead of like combining like terms, we're expanding that negative 19 like this. Negative 21x plus a 2x. So that way if I were to combine them, you know, I would get what I started with. And so, perfect. By doing that, I got myself 4 terms, which, if you recall our steps, the next thing to do is to factor this guy by grouping. And so let me start with the first one. GCF, let's see, what do they both have? They're both divisible by a 3. In fact, they're both divisible by a negative 3, so I think I'm going to do that. And they both have a variable x, so I'm going to take out an x too. So that would be the common factor for both of them. And let's see. What can I multiply negative 3 by that would get me negative 3? Well, just a 1. And I had an x squared, and I took an x away. So this x squared is going to bump down to an x. Now let's see. What can I multiply negative 3 by that would get me negative 21? Well, I already have the negative taken care of, so I think I actually need a plus 7. And it had an x that I took away, so this guy just bumped down to a number. No variable involved. Now that one isn't necessary. We can get rid of it before we write our final answer. But let's take care of the second guy. Let's see. 2 and 14. Oh, that's easy. They both share a 2. Plus 2. More specific, a positive 2. So let's see. When I take the 2 away from him, just an x. Oh, I forgot to make the black parentheses again. I'm trying to be somewhat consistent. And then 14. 2 times what would give me 14? Well, a positive 7. So I think they're the same. I just wrote a 1 in front of this one, but you know, there's a 1 understood there. So I'm not too worried about that. So I'm ready for my final kind of like regrouping here. And let's see. They both had x plus 7. And in the second group, you know, the outside things, what's left? Negative 3x plus a 2. Now the only other thing that we possibly could do, I know some folks don't like having, oh gosh, didn't mean to write there. Some folks don't like to have a negative in that leading coefficient. So one possibility that could happen would be if I factored out a negative 1 from this group. All right, so since I have it written kind of awkwardly, I should have thought about that before. But here's the deal. We'll worry about the second group first. If I factor out a negative 1 from him, that just makes my 3x turn positive. And if I factor out a negative, what's going to happen here? It's going to change the sign to minus 2. Okay? So some people are kind of nitpicky when they say completely factored. So I guess technically we could do that. As far as me, I'll accept this. I'm fine with that. Okay? But this could be an extra step that you do. But as far as this video, that kind of finishes it up for us. So that's it for me. Keep learning, have fun, and I will see you next time, guys.